So what if I told you there's a simple math trick that could totally change how you think about your money? Seriously, it's called the Rule of 72, and honestly, it's one of the most powerful and yet simplest tools for understanding your financial future. Let's dive in.
$10 billion. That's what the Los Angeles Lakers just sold for recently. Now get this, way back in 1979, Jerry Buss bought the team for just $67 million. I mean, that sounds like an absolutely incredible return on investment.
But was it really the greatest investment ever? Like, of all time? How would we even know? Well, that little math trick I mentioned, it can give us the answer. And it's the exact same trick you can use for your own investments.
And that secret tool is exactly what we're here to unpack. We're going to use it to solve this whole Lakers mystery and, way more importantly, see how you can apply it to your own life.
You know, the engine behind all this magic is something Einstein supposedly called the eighth wonder of the world: compound interest. It's that amazing process where your money just starts earning money all by itself, creating this massive snowball of growth over time.
So here's the deal. The Rule of 72 is our mental shortcut to understanding that compounding power. It's a beautifully simple formula that gives you a quick and dirty estimate of how long it'll take for your money to double.
And I mean it when I say it's easy. You just take the number 72 and you divide it by whatever your annual interest rate is. That's it. The number you get is roughly how many years it's going to take to double your cash. You don't even need a calculator.
Okay, so let's jump back to the Lakers. That investment grew 150 times over 46 years. When you break it all down, that means the money effectively doubled about 7.5 times. So that works out to one doubling roughly every 6 years.
And now for the big reveal. If we use our rule, 72 divided by those 6 years, we get an average annual return of about 12%. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a fantastic return, but was it the best he could have done?
Well, here's the kicker. If Jerry Buss had just put that same $67 million into a boring old S&P 500 index fund, he would have earned about 13% a year. His investment would have grown to roughly $13 billion, and that's without the headache of actually running a sports team.
See, this isn't really about the Lakers. It's about a principle that applies to all of us. The real magic isn't finding some once-in-a-lifetime deal. It's about understanding the raw power of doubling, and the single most important ingredient is time.
This example right here shows you just how critical time is. If you start investing just $500 a month at age 25, you could have over $1 million by the time you're 55. But what if you wait just 7 years and start at 32? You end up with roughly half that amount. That 7-year delay costs you $500,000. It's insane.
And here's why that happens. Different investments just have different doubling times. If you look at historical averages, stocks have doubled your money about every 9 years. Now compare that to bonds at 18 years or CDs at 16. It's pretty clear. The higher the average return, the faster you double.
Okay, so this is all great information, but how can you actually use this to speed things up for yourself? Let's make this personal and see how you can put your own growth into overdrive.
All right, let's put this into practice. Imagine you've got $10,000 to invest. That's a really solid starting point for a lot of people. Let's see what the Rule of 72 can do with it.
So, using our rule, we take 72 and divide it by a 10% return. That means your 10 grand would double to $20,000 in about 7.2 years. And that's just by letting it sit there and compound all on its own. That's already pretty amazing. But here's where it gets really exciting. What happens if you don't just let that money sit there? What if you actively add to it, even a small consistent amount, like just $200 a month? In that same 7-year period, your original $10,000 doesn't just double, it grows to around $37,000. You've more than tripled your initial investment just by adding those small, steady contributions. That, right there, is the power of combining compounding with consistency.
Okay, now, before we get too carried away, it's really important to remember something. This is a powerful tool, for sure, but it does have its limits. You got to think of it as a rule of thumb, not, an unbreakable law of physics.
First off, it's just an estimate. It works best for interest rates that are kind of in that sweet spot between 6 and 10%. If the rate is lower, it tends to slightly overestimate the time to double, and if the rate's higher, it underestimates. And a really big one, it doesn't factor in things like taxes or fees, which definitely impact your real return.
And you can see that really clearly right here. Look, at 8%, the rule is almost perfect. 9 years versus 9.01.
But down at 2%, it's off by a full year. And up at 15%, it's off by a couple of months. So it's a fantastic mental shortcut. Just don't treat it like a precision instrument.
And finally, this rule kind of has a darker side. You can use it in reverse to understand inflation. So, if inflation is chugging along at 8%, you just divide 72 by 8, and you see that your money will lose half of its buying power in just 9 years. It's a sobering thought, but it's absolutely vital to understand.
So all of this brings us to one final crucial point. Time is your most valuable asset. Every single one of us has a limited number of these doubling periods in our lifetime. The real question is, how are you going to use yours?